Well, hello and welcome to the latest installment of Ranking Records. This is Mike from Music City. I hope everyone out there is safe and doing well. Today we are going to look at the career of one of my all-time favorite artists, and that is Gram Parsons. As Gram calls it, he started something called Cosmic American Music, and he's one of the forerunners of the country rock movement and very influential through this day. And just tragically, he did die young, and got to think about what he could be doing today if he was still around. But still, there's quite a substantial Gram Parsons legacy to explore. Now, I'm going to do it a little bit different today, and I'm going to sort of walk through his repertoire is not a good word, his recording history in order, and then maybe we'll go back and do a little bit of a ranking. But before we start, I always think about how I first discovered Gram Parsons, and I was really getting myself interested in the country rock movement. I'll never forget, I first heard about him when he died, and strange death. If you don't know the story about how he when he died of a drug overdose in Joshua Tree, and how his road manager Phil Kaufman, who lives here in Nashville, stole his body and burned it, and all. It's a long, crazy story, and there's even a movie about it called Grand Theft Parsons. That's not the greatest movie, but if you're interested in the story, it's not a bad way to get it. And I read about his death. I remember, like, in Circus magazine, this little piece, and and it just kind of led me to discover his music, and I'm forever just a huge fan of his music. So let's take a walk through the catalog, and I want to start first. There's some early recordings that he made. He lived down in Florida with a band called the Shilohs, and those recordings have been released in a couple of different compilations called Gram Parsons: The Early Years, 1963 to 65. Again, I wouldn't look to these to learn about Parsons if you just become really fascinated with him and looking for sort of a historical background. You might want to go check these recordings out. They're not bad, but they're he's very young, and really you can see his country influences, but he really hadn't developed into let's just call it the cosmic American sound just yet. And I think really Gram, I'm laughing here, but Gram actually went to Harvard, I think, for a semester. And I think it was up there that he met a lot of some of these musicians. And the first real solid recording effort that he put together on a record label, and it was with the famous Lee Hazelwood on Lee Hazelwood Productions, and it was a release called the International Submarine Band. And this version I have here is a 1985 release of the record on Rhino. I think there's probably a lot of different versions of it out there that you can find. But interestingly enough, where the name comes from? It comes from a Little Rascals skit, and I'm a big Little Rascals fan, where they had on the radio show, and they had the band called the International Silverstream Submarine Band. Gram dropped the title, whoever named the band, I'm not sure if it was Gram or not, dropped the silver string out of it. I listened to this album yesterday because it's been a while, and I really think it's a great record, and it really shows you Parsons on his path to the later music he was going to make. The opening track is one of the best songs I think Gram has ever done, called Blue Eyes, and if you're interested, I would go out and give that a listen on Spotify before you discover this. Also from this record is a song called Luxury Liner, another great song by Gram. And that was a song later, you may recall it, Emmylou Harris, who will enter Gram's career at some point, we'll talk about that, actually titled an album Luxury Liner and recorded her version of that song. The fellows with Gram in the band were Bob Buchanan, John Nuesi, and John Cornell. You may have heard those names before in the country rock world, but again, a pretty good record and a pretty good way to maybe to start your Gram Parsons journey. Now, the next phase of Parsons' career is probably one that he gets a lot of notoriety for in rock history, and really for kicking off the country rock movement, or helping kick off the country rock movement, is that's when he became a member of the Byrds and recorded the seminal album Sweetheart of the Rodeo. You know, just a classic record. Of course, went nowhere at the time, but it's just fantastic. And you know, the 50th anniversary of it came up, and there was a great tour supporting it and everything. But Parsons, you know, was very influential in this record, insofar as, you know, opening Roger McGuinn, the leader of the Byrds, eyes to country music. And you know, Parsons sang three. Well, the story here is that Lee Hazelwood still claimed to have, or he did have Parsons under contract, and Parsons' vocals were erased from some of the songs off of Sweetheart of the Rodeo, but you can still hear him on, I'm looking at the record, on You're Still on My Mind, a cover version, 100 Years From Now, and Hickory Wind. Those last two were originals, and of course Hickory Wind being one of Parsons' you know, all-time greatest songs that he ever written. And the interesting thing is, interesting fact, you know, the Byrds came to Nashville to do the Grand Ole Opry, and you know, they were seen as a bunch of hippies, kind of got booed. They were supposed to do, I forget the first song they did, but I know the second song they were supposed to do a Merle Haggard song, and, you know, very strict rules, and Parson just, you know, went ahead against, you know, what they said they were going to do, and he said, here's a song from my grandmother, and he did Hickory Wind. And they just got lambasted by all the country music people, in particular the noted Nashville disc jockey Ralph Emery was very critical of the band, and to which Parsons wrote the famous song, He's a Drugstore Truck Driving Man, which you need to check out, and his response to Emery's actions. Now, fortunately, they came out later on CD with a legacy version of the Sweetheart of the Rodeo, and it does have as the bonus tracks some of those restored, wiped off Gram Parsons vocals, you know, from the other one. I may have had it wrong which songs he sang on. I think 100 Years From Now might have been erased and recorded by McGuinn. I didn't go back. I apologize for that. But You're Still on My Mind, you know, is another one. Life in Prison, The Christian Life we've got with Parsons' vocals. So this is very legendary. Well, Parsons at this time started hanging around with the Rolling Stones. You know, really, Keith Richards was probably the best influence on his lifestyle. He missed gigs, and it was just kind of a sloppy time for him. And he put his foot down and did not go to play in South Africa with the Byrds, and I think the Stones were very supportive of that decision. So, in other words, he didn't make the trip. He got kicked out of the Byrds. For his next musical step, he hooked up with an ex-Byrd, Chris Hillman, and together they formed a fantastic band called the Flying Burrito Brothers. And their first effort here was Gilded Palace of Sin, just a tremendous country rock record. On here you've got Hot Burrito 1 and Hot Burrito 2, which, you know, I'll let the mystery, you probably know these songs, but those don't show up in the title. I'll let you go listen to them. Christine's Tune, which we better know as Devil in Disguise. Sin City, oh gosh, Wheels, Juanita. Just classic songs that live on today as being very popular in the country music canon. And if you're interested in Gilded Palace of the Sin, I like to recommend 33 and a Third books when they're good, and this one is good. The 33 and a Third book. It was written by a music writer named Bob Prowell. I'm not familiar with Bob. Bob did an excellent job on covering Gilded Palace. I strongly recommend this book. Now, the Burrito Brothers with Parsons did do one more album together, but this is when kind of things started falling apart in Parsons' lifestyle. And they put out Burrito Deluxe, and it was really hastily put together. You know, things that were kind of lying around. I don't think it was much of the album they would have intended it to be. But very noteworthy on here is Wild Horses, the Jagger Richards composition, and Parsons did get the okay from them to be the first one to record this song. Stop the beeping on my computer there. Sorry about that. You know, there's been a lot of talk over the years whether or not Parsons had written or anything into the song, and I think the jury on that is he probably came out on that is that he probably didn't. But again, a great version of Wild Horses. Again, just not nowhere near up to the standard that Gilded Palace of Sin have set. Now, so where did Parsons go from here? He met a girl in Washington, D.C., and there's a little bit of Nashville connection to this. The first time that Gram Parsons and Emmylou Harris ever sang together was at Walter Egan's apartment in D.C. Walter told me that story firsthand. It's a fantastic one. And, Gram and Emmylou just hit it off and worked well together. And the first time they worked together was on Gram's debut solo album called GP. And this is where I first discovered Gram's music. And this album just really, really meant a lot to me. I played it to death. It's just fantastic. Some incredible duets with Emmylou. We'll Sweep Out the Ashes in the Morning. That's All It Took. Some cover versions. I've always loved Streets of Baltimore, his cover of a Harlan Howard song. And, just a fantastic record. Now, another interesting Nashville connection to this, and I think this is one of the most unusual things I've ever come across in music history. This is a Gram Parsons solo album. How in the world do you have a song on your solo album that you don't sing lead vocal on? Well, on the song Cry One More Time, which is a Jay Giles song, local Nashvilleian musician Barry Tashin actually sings the lead vocal, and he told me the story that I believe I got it posted on somewhere on my blog. You could, if you do a search for Barry, you'll find it out. But just Barry thought that would be a great song from the dude. He laid down the vocal on it, and that's what made the album. So I think that's a pretty strange story. But we got one more solo album from Gram Parsons before he passed away, and actually it was released posthumously, and that's Grievous Angel. And to me, this is the landmark record of Gram's career. And we got to the point, too, where on the back it says, with Emmylou Harris. So she got a little bit of a credit for the fantastic duo they've become. But, oh my gosh, I mean, Return of the Grievous Angel, such a great song. There's a live version, a mock live version of Hickory Wind on here. He reprises one of the greatest duets of Gram and Emmylou of all time is on here. Love Hurts, Las Vegas, another great song. But for me, two songs stand out as just being some of the best, probably the best things that Gram ever done. The first is In My Hour of Darkness, and the second, definitely in my top 5 favorite songs of all time, Brass Buttons. Just a beautiful vocal, a tender song about, is it about lost love? Is it about someone dying? However you want to read into it, look at it that way, you'll find it to be such a great song. Now, one thing I do want to say, if you're out there trying to get into Gram, that you can find a CD release with the 2 records on it pretty easily. And also you could find it, if you're really goofy and collect things, I even got it on cassette where they put the 2 solo records on cassette. So that's some way you might discover those 2 albums. And then also for the completist, and after you listen to those albums and love them so much, you're going to want to go try to seek this out. This came out on Rhino. I think it was one of the, remember it was Rhino was doing a series called Rhino's Handmade where they put out some special releases. It may be hard to find, but this is the complete reprise sessions for the 2 Gram Parsons solo albums. Tons and tons of fantastic outtakes. Definitely worth it once you become a Gram Parsons nut like me. Now, we had a couple other things come out that I want to mention. Here's a release that came out. Not too. Let's see. It came out, I think, in the 70s. Gram Parsons and the Flying Burrito Brothers, called "Sleepless Nights," and this is 9 tracks that were burrito songs that never got put on a record, and it's also 3 from the first, let's see, from the first Gram Parsons album or Grievous Angel, like from Grievous Angel. They might be on the on the Rhino thing. I didn't go double check, but again, some good stuff on here. I actually would enjoy listening to this better than Burrito Deluxe, but again, not an official album, just things that were found in the vaults and they put out. And then one last thing I want to cover that I think you should check out if you want to discover Parsons, and that's Gram Parsons and his band called the Fallen Angels, live 1973. This comes from I believe it came from a WLIR in Long Island radio broadcast. It did radio broadcasts in '73. It's enjoyable, but I think when you listen to this, I think you really start to see that Gram needed to take better care of himself. The pictures, he looks a little overweight. It just wasn't the best performance. They actually came out with a video of this that's really painstaking to watch because the quality is so grainy and so poor. But it does give you an idea what it would look like to see Gram and Emmylou. And I still, if I had my time machine, the one concert I would go back to see would be a performance of Gram and Emmylou. So not Gram at his best, but certainly well worth a listen. Now, I always like to talk about books. There's a lot to read on Gram Parsons. Unfortunately, when you only live 26 years, a lot of the writing gets redundant. So that made some of the latter books that came out not as interesting as the first things that you read. Now, the first book ever to come out by Gram Parsons was sort of a anthology of photos and short pieces, and was put together by Sid Griffith, who was in the band, Sid Griffin, excuse me, I always get that mixed up, who is and was the lead singer for the band The Long Riders, and he was a huge fan and influenced by Parsons. So this was really enjoyable if you can still find this. But the first really thorough, exhaustive book about Parsons was Hickory Wind, The Life and Times of Gram Parsons, that was written by Ben Fong Torres, who was a famous writer from Rolling Stone. And this is fantastic. This is a really good read, and this is where I'd recommend, learning your nuts and bolts about Parsons. Later on, this book, 20,000 Roads, came out by David Meyer. There's also another one called God's Own Singer that came out by Jason Walker. Again, as I mentioned, after reading the Ben Fong Torres book, I just wasn't so jazzed to read the other ones because they gave me such a good job of the basic story. One other book I'd like to recommend, I think that was fantastic. One of the best authors out there about the country rock movement is a fellow named John Einerson. He's put out several books, and he got together with Chris Hillman and put out this book on the Flying Burrito Brothers. Highly recommended if you like the burritos and just good Parsons stuff in there. I think this is worth seeking out. So, what I want to do now to wrap up is sort of rank the official releases of Parsons. So we'll exclude the live record and Sleepless Nights and the early stuff. And I had this in my mind, so give me a second while I put it back together. Well, we'll do it this way. And all right, my number one, my most favorite. We're not going to go worst. We'll call anything the worst, but we'll start from the bottom. We're supposed to do that. Starting from the bottom, as I mentioned, I'm gonna put Burrito Deluxe. Not a lot of thought behind putting the record. A couple of good cuts, but overall, just not as strong as the other stuff in Parsons' catalog. Next, I'm going to put the International Submarine Band, Safe at Home. Again, just youth is the excuse of why this one doesn't make it. I mean, a lot more was to come from Parsons in maturing as an artist and also as a songwriter. But again, go listen to Blue Eyes. I think that's one of the best songs that Parsons has ever done. Now next, and okay, I know it's one of the greatest albums of all time, but we're talking about Gram Parsons. I'm going to put Sweetheart of the Rodeo just because of the short amount of Parsons' contributions on the original record. But again, if you don't own Sweetheart of the Rodeo, you don't know about Sweetheart of the Rodeo, please get into it. Next, I'm going to put Gilded Palace of Sin. Gilded Palace of Sin, a remarkable record, one of my all-time favorite records. These these three records, this and the two that are remaining, are just so close together on my list, and so loved by me that ranking is almost irrelevant. Number 2, we'll go with GP, the debut solo album by Gram Parsons. I love that picture, by the way, and if you don't know, that was taken at the Chateau Marmont Hotel on Sunset Strip, the place where the actor John Belushi died. And if you notice, there's a bottle of Annie Green Springs wine on the table. And if you're my age, you may remember Annie Green Springs wine from your high school days. And then last, number 1, there it is, Grievous Angel. Just a tremendous record. I love this record, and I love listening to it on vinyl, and I'm probably going to go ahead and put it on right now, as a matter of fact. But that's it. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about Gram Parsons. Just what a fantastic artist. Oh gosh, if he was still with us today, I just think of what he would have done. Please comment in the comment section. I'd like to hear what y'all have to say. Also, if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our channel. Help make me more famous, like I'm trying to say to everybody. And hit that like button, share it on your socials, and let me know what else you'd like us to do. Thanks again. This is Mike from Music City signing off.